Hi. Well, we're getting ahead finally with the review and critique of your depth of field assignments, at least those that were turned in on time, although there were some more that came in later. They didn't make the transfer to here to be critiqued. It's going to take us probably 3 parts to get through all this, so you won't have to fall asleep between or during a module at least. So here we go. Shot number 1. And here we have a nice street scene with the use of deep depth of field. The depth of field part seems to be working perfectly. So you've got everything from foreground to background sharp. On the JPEG, I can't tell exactly how much detail there is in the shadows, but if there is some, it'd be nice to bring it out. It would be hard to do during the shot. This exposure where things are lit is a good one. Here, with the light right on it, it's a little bit overexposed, so you're about as close as you can get to a right exposure with this camera. However, we might be able to bring some of that out. If we come over and make a duplicate layer, then turn this into a screen layer. Oh, look at all of that detail. Wow. Okay. So I'm going to make this a reversed or an inverted layer mask. Hold down the Alt key. And now with a white brush, which I fortunately have already in the bin, nice soft brush. I'm going to set this to about 80%. Now I can come through and bring a lot of this detail back in. That's so dark it's not coming back. But some of this other will. So, if we want to see that exaggerated a little, then we can do this again. We can make another duplicate layer and brighten that up even more. So we can bring some of that back if it was captured. The good news is, in digital, when the highlights are blown out, they're gone. But often there is detail and data down in those shadow areas that's still there that you could probably bring out with a little bit of work. So we can make this whole approach work pretty well. Okay, let's go grab the next one, since we have a pile of these to do. When I first saw this, I wasn't sure what it was. I thought it was a bucking horse, but it turns out it's a bucking lion. Now, that's something you don't see every day. I'm an old cowboy from the West, and I used to be pretty good at riding some rough horse stock, but I don't think I would want to ride a bucking lion. It would likely be bad news when I fell off. But this is an interesting selection for the narrow depth of field, and it works pretty well. The lion is sharp. It would be nice if there was a little more information in the lion, if it were a little lighter, but based on the way we did that the last time with the duplicate layer, screen layer, and lighten some of that up, this could work pretty well. The composition works pretty well for this scene, so other than getting rid of little things like this little spot here in the corner, and the simplest way to do that is to take our brush, hold down the Alt key, which brings up the picker tool, the eyedropper tool, click on that, and just get rid of it. We can do the same thing here and go over some of these little distracting lights if we wanted to, but we'd use the same procedure. So that works out pretty well. Interesting shot. My curiosity is now piqued on whether or not this color on the lion is real. Is that the color of the spotlights that are on it? If so, that's interesting choice. Yellow and kind of a magenta purplish color. Okay, let's go on. Oh, what a nice shot of the little girl in her ever so picked up clean room. I'm sure glad to see that it isn't just boys that are little piggies in their room. But this is cool. It would be very nice if there were more light on her. But again, we can bring that out a little. Since there is plenty of detail, the odds are good that we can lighten that up quite a bit. So if we come over and we make our duplicate layer and make that into our screen layer, oh, look at all that information that's in there. So let's make this into reversed mask, but first I'm going to bring down some of it a little bit. There we go. Now I'm going to hold down the Alt key, click on the layer mask tool. I already have the white brush loaded, so I'm going to come in and bring her back. And now, just like in the last example, if we wanted to lighten her even more, all we have to do is to create another duplicate layer. And now we've really put some light on her. We may want to drop the opacity of this layer a little bit or do something to bring that back. There we go. Now we have a nicer shot. I would probably vignette down some of this wall just to get rid of your attention to this. Maybe get rid of that. Crop this down just a little bit. That would keep us from noticing that the lines are off, at least as badly as they are. We don't need to see all of her clothes piled on the bed to get the idea. Here's part of it. And now we can concentrate a little better on her. We don't have those big light distractions up in there. In fact, I would probably pick up the burn tool. And once I flattened it, gotten rid of those masks. Now I can burn that down a little. Take our eye off of it. So this is an easy fix. It's a really cute little portrait. In many years hence, if you hang on to this, you can probably use it for blackmail against her when she gets into her teens and brings her boyfriend home for the first time. So this picture could turn out to be really valuable. Oh, and here's another shot of her with whatever this was she was waving around. Our only problem here is this window behind her is so bright, is glaring at you so much that it just visually bleeds over onto her face and makes it really hard to see that face. So this is a shooting issue. We could lighten her face considerably, but it's still going to be this bright, bright, bright glow from the window behind. And this is such a cute face. We don't want to see this in silhouette. We really want to see it. So about the only solution to really do that is first to come in very, very tight so we get rid of a lot of this glare. Can't get rid of all of it unless we start cropping seriously into her. And that might ultimately be what we're forced to do a little. Suppose we do that. There we do have a cute picture of her. It doesn't show the room, but the glare in the other one doesn't show much of the room either. And with this, then we could lighten her up with the same thing. I just made a duplicate layer, put a screen on it, The white's what it is. We can't either lighten or darken that much. So I'm going to bring her back just a little. And now we've got a much nicer shot of the little girl where you're seeing her peek over this blanket or whatever she's holding. That can be really cute. Okay, let's move on. Back in Colorado, where I was, here in the middle of snow country, I had a neighbor that had a yard full of these pink plastic flamingos, which, especially in the winter, when the whole yard was covered with snow, looked even more ridiculous than they looked in the summer. But they apparently loved them. So what can I say? Well, here's the real thing. They could usually come out and see some of this would have helped them. The feathers on most birds are so reflective that the strong light hitting them, even though you've got a good exposure everywhere else, in camera raw, you could have brought down these highlights and most likely put some detail back into these feathers. By the time we get to this JPEG, particularly in the highlights, there's probably nothing here that we can use for that. Let me see, just... I can bring it down a little bit, but not very much. This would have been a conversion issue in camera raw. Other than that, these little things, I don't know what they are. Probably part of the park's arrangement or the pool are really distracting here at the bottom. I would go out of my way to get rid of those, either clone them out with the water, or you've already lost most of the feet here. You could simply crop it. That leaves this one, but this would be an easy one to get rid of. Just one. We've got this kind of unresolved partial bird here. Same over on this side. So I would move it a little on them. So here we have them. I guess they're preening their feathers. I'm not sure what they do when they're doing this other than getting practice at stretching their necks into weird shapes. Well, here we have a shallow depth of field shot with our focus area right in here. It certainly serves the depth of field assignment. It is a little bit unresolved because we don't really know from this what is the subject. Is it this leaf? Is it this crack in the wood? These other things are out of focus, so we'll make the assumption it's not them. So what could we do to bring that into a stronger picture? Well, this really is a shooting thing. You needed to pull in tighter so that in camera, if that is your subject, you're into something like that, where now it's becoming more obvious what this is. We could get rid of a little of this out of focus foreground. That would help us a little. So this kind of thing would tighten up that shot quite a bit and make it clear what you're supposed to look at. Remember, you're allowed to move in. If you can do it when you're shooting, that's better because you still get all of the sensor real estate to work with. But if you can't, then you've got to crop it after the fact. Now we have one issue in here, and that's this bright bit of out of focus bokeh here. I would tone that down, and I would tone it down with one of these natural colors that's around it. So I would pick up probably this tone. It's kind of a neutral color. Just to darken that so it's not quite as obtrusive as it was. Okay, grab the next one. Well, it says this is the max shot. We really don't need this for your turn-in stuff. What I would be concerned about is, yes, you've got a lot of depth of field, but what really is this picture about? Is this a subtle self-portrait with your shadow here taking the picture? Maybe. Well, we need to see it a little more clearly. Is it a portrait of the dirt? Well, maybe. There's plenty of it. It's a large amount of the real estate on this picture. Is it of this flag? Probably not. We can't see it. We have no idea what it says. The walkway out to the marina, the building behind, I don't know. What is interesting is that this side of the building in shade is about the same color as you would expect the sky to be, and it's almost disconcerting at first when you look at it. And at first I thought it was the sky, and this was a banner or something hanging out over it. I had to really look at it. You're also really crooked in this. The flag is straight. The banner looks pretty straight. But now we've got a mismatch here. So I would either get rid of this using something like the spot healing brush, just so it wasn't in the way. Let me do that so we can see it. And therefore you're not really noticing that line so much. But in the end, it's really somewhat unresolved as to what the shot is about. If we go to the next one, remember I said do different shots of different things. Don't just sit one place and do one with one aperture and one with another, which is kind of what happened here. And again, what is this shot about? It is shallow depth of field. I'll give you that. God knows it's shallow depth of field. But it's shallow depth of field of what? What is the story here? Without a story, this is like reading one of those horrible manuals from some other country where the person who wrote the manual for your appliance didn't really speak English but had an English dictionary handy and just looked up the words without any syntax to go with them. It became gibberish. And that's visually, in our visual language, that's what we're left with here. We've got words that we sort of understand, but the way they go together doesn't tell us anything. So you've got to be careful with that. So, okay, that is the end of part number 1. We'll be back with part number 2 in a jiffy.